Coming up, when I put my hand up on your hip, you dip, we all take another dip into the draft. Looking at 3 more players here from McNeely, Clifford, Sorber, a range of guys we keep talking about from 19 all the way back to 27. Little nuggets for the Brooklyn Nets to pick up. We dive in. Coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marmbeck. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And today, we got a collection of players here worth taking a look at for the Brooklyn Nets. As we continue to say, the draft board, especially as you work back into the teens and into the 20s, is very fluid. It's very subject, I think, the team needs and the profile of the player that you like. We kick it off here taking a look at McNeely.
Yeah, like 20 straight episodes of us saying, man, this draft is super interesting. Just because, and it helps that the Nets have tons of picks, but thank goodness we got this in a year where the draft is super deep, because there would be years where this wouldn't be nearly as interesting for sure. But this year, 1, because where the Nets are picking, 2, because they have so many picks, and 3, just the nature of this draft that's just continues to be all over the place. Now you get through the combine, people measuring different things, guys flying up and down boards based on that stuff. It's going to be fluid, I think, pretty much all the way to the draft. And you get guys like Liam McNeeley to start, who, again, kind of like Hugo Gonzalez yesterday, kind of like Nolan Traore, was a guy, if you did the draft last summer, was a top 10 guy. He was a top 10 guy going into UConn, and he got to UConn, and he's no longer a top 10 guy. and so
not so top 10 guy anymore.
He's fallen to probably like where he's aggregated somewhere around the late teens, early 20s, something like that. And it's just another interesting case where a year removed from mock drafts, and you get a year of playing time or a year of injuries or year whatever it's going to happen, different kind of systems. These guys go from high school where it's like a curated system, and then they go to college and it's like not exactly the same, and it all gets a little harder, right? Like this is why this is such a fluid thing. So Liam McNeeley went into last summer as a guy who was like, okay, well, he's going to be like a lights out shooter. He's going to be able to catch and shoot this stuff. And he got to UConn and shot 32% from 3 and 38% from the field. And you're kind of like, well, what's the story here? Because it really looked like he was going to project to be like a pretty high draft pick, and now he's not. So we can go into like a little bit of what happened, but like for starters, I still tend to like default to guys with some kind of like fake pedigree or whatever it is. But this one actually pushes a little further past like the Hugo Gonzalez thing, because I think he did show there was real limitations when he was at UConn.
Yeah, he's not super athletic. You go back to these games here at UConn, 32 minutes a night, playing 26 games, knocking down only 31.7, under 32% from beyond the arc, and that's on 5.5 attempts per game. I just, so unlike, as you said, like the model and where these guys have been and then where they are now, maybe this is like me yesterday. I can't remember which guy it was for you. I can't remember which guy, Danny Wolf, right? You're like, I don't know. I guess I look at McNeely and I'm like, well, you're like supposed to be a, catch and shoot threat, and you can, move off ball pretty well, but you're not super athletic. And if you get to the next level and you're not knocking down threes, then I don't know what you are. So if it happens, that's great. But you have to think about whether or not something went awry in his 1 year at college to justify still keeping him probably in that, you mentioned, 20th kind of range. I'm assuming that he ends up going somewhere on the back end of the first round if we're lining up our board after a month and after combine and all this kind of extra information comes in.
I think, okay, so if you look at his catch and shoot, he was 37% on catch and shoot threes and 43% he was unguarded. It was kind of everything else that dragged the numbers down. Like he had to do a lot of off the dribble stuff. He was coming off screens and like they weren't always clean looks, and it drove the rest of the numbers down. Like he still shot well from the line, 87%. I think the shooting, I kind of am willing to say that the shooting at UConn was a blip, with the understanding that he's like not going to be a guy that can probably get his own 3 at the NBA level, right? Like the difference where you make a leap, where you make a leap to like superstar level is where you can take the threes, but you can also take the threes that you made for yourself, right? Or you can take shots at the rim that you made for yourself. It's a little harder to see with him. I do think at his size, 6'8", you can't teach size, right? If he's going to show up here 6'8" with a definitely an NBA frame, right? Like he's a big guy, 215. Like if you're going to show up at 6'8", 215, like not kind of a shorter wingspan and be able to shoot threes, and I think it will come around for him and be able to, shoot when you're open, like you'll have a role in the NBA. Like you'll stick around. Now you're not going to be a max guy or anything like that. I don't think you can project him that high. Like I don't think you can project the ceiling kind of that high. But I think like from a floor perspective, you're like, okay, can he come off screens and hit threes? Can he like, attack a close? Not even, he's not going to attack a closeout. Can he like just punish defenses if they kind of load up on someone else on the team? Yeah, he'll probably get there on that. So I think he probably doesn't fall like lower than 20 because of that, because I think especially if you're a team, I mean, frankly, if you're just one of these teams that's drafting in the 20s that feels like they just like need a shooter or something like that, like you can talk yourself into it, I think, pretty easily with a guy like him. I just think that if you're like projecting long-term sort of like, franchise changing stuff, not like for instance, if you're like Minnesota, right? If you're Minnesota and you're like drafting at 17, I don't know, you want to like another floor spacer around Ant? Like that feels pretty good to me, right? Like I think like that's something like, or Orlando at 16, honestly. Like it's like, okay, they need shooters, they need 3-point shooters. They have some other guys here. They don't need to worry about all the upside. They have the superstars on their team. I think you could like put him into that situation and feel pretty good about it. The Nets are not in that situation, which is why I probably wouldn't want to do it. But I think if I'm another team that's drafting a little more on need, and your need is 3-point shooting with a little bit of length to not get totally blitzed on, like if you have to guard a 4 or something like that, I think you call it and probably feel pretty good about it. Does that make sense? Like I like he's kind of fits that kind of model for me.
Yeah, and I will say, like, so it's like talking from a Nets perspective. You go at 19, I'm not taking McNeely at 19. It just doesn't like, and not that he won't be there. And if the shot develops and you project another 2 years from now and you draft other players, like he can be the floor spacer for you. But I can see teams a little bit higher in the draft looking at him and saying, to your point, well, we already have the guys, we already know the guys that are here. We already have our core, and this just helps our floor a little bit. So then you start to just you mentioned there maybe Orlando at 16. You talk about the like I wouldn't assume the Utah Jazz are coming after him, or like the Atlanta Hawks, right? But maybe Pacers want to add more firepower on their roster and some outside shooting after whatever happens for them in the Eastern Conference Finals. So it probably depends on where the boards are for other teams, because even if you're talking about, which is where I think some places have McNeely going 16 to Orlando, but you're also, excuse me, still in that range, guys that we've talked about before, guy we're going to talk about today, Thomas Sorber, Demon, who we talked about, right? There's a handful of other players here that it probably, I wonder if you're taking him at say 15, 16, 17, because that's your pick that you have, as opposed to, right, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, you're like, well, I've got 4 shots here to land some guys that can have some value. And it's probably the one part of this conversation that we haven't really discussed, because it's for other teams of, well, what if you only have 1 pick in the round? And what if it's only in the mid to late teens? You're going to be looking at the entire first round and saying, who's the guy we think best fits us? And if you can't look beyond McNeely and really like a guy with some size and knockdown 3-point ability that fits that role, then you probably, not even hard to convince yourself, but you say, okay, then we'll take him at 16, because we don't have another chance here until the second round to maybe find a guy that fits that profile. And as you said yesterday, and we said with some other prospects, you got the guy that fits the profile and was higher once upon a time and has fallen for different reasons. You can still squint and say, yes, but at one point he was considered X on the board. And that's something that other guys can't do when you're coming from, say, the 30s and trying to push up even into the 20s in that conversation.
Yeah, I like 100%. And like again, when you get to these mid-teen picks, like there are going to be teams here that just need this kind of guy. I could actually just run through all these teams. Like OKC probably would feel okay about it, right? Like
I was going to ask about OKC there at 50, like even above Orlando at 15, saying like, oh, maybe that, but then you're like a little bit rich, but they have another, they can have another shot at that going into the mid-20s.
He doesn't strike me as a Presti guy based on the other guys Presti's drafted in the past. So like, I don't think they do it. I was more just like teams that just need this kind of shooting and this kind of off-ball guy and guy that can run off pin downs and stuff like that. Then you can, there's a bunch of teams in the teens and even early 20s that can easily tell this story. So that's why I think he'll end up like going in that range just because of how he projects. Like I said, it just shouldn't probably be the kind of guy the Nets are going for, because I don't think like the Nets just have to be shooting all supreme upside kind of, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it should be a mix.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it should be a mix. I mean, they have a lot of picks. I don't know. Maybe I could go back and forth on that. Maybe it should be like, kind of do both or something. There's probably no right or wrong way for them to do this. Frankly, they just need so much that like anybody, again, Liam McNeeley would walk in and be like the fourth best guy on the team now. So like, or something like that. It's just, they just in such a weird spot.
And it's funny here because we're going to move on to our next player in a second, but it's like talking about, and then you think about the veterans on your team. Well, you got a Cam Johnson. He's a guy that's knocking down threes. Maybe start to set the table to be able to, think about your veterans and trades and all that other jazz. Coming up here in a second, we take a look at our next player on the board. Who's the name of that big red dog, Doug?
Is it Clifford? Oh, Clifford. Jeez. What's so funny about that? You set me up on that, but then I was like, then I got confused because like, wait, that's not his name. But okay, yeah, Nique Clifford. Okay, I'm going to take us to the break. We'll be back here in a second, talk about Nique Clifford. Before we get to that, I'll let you know about our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing. Every night's delivering highlight-worthy performances. We're into those conference finals now. Major momentum shifts. Can't miss moments. You got a game-winning shot, breakout player. It's no better time to get in on the action. Now with FanDuel makes it so easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. They got the player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. It's the SGPs for all the ones that know. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. You figure out what the players are going to show up in the biggest moments. You're tracking those trends to help you build that next bet. What it would look like to combine live props mid-game based on how the actions unfold. Oh, you get that $200 in bonus bets going as soon as, actually, I'm saying this tonight because Knicks Pacers tonight, game 2. You'll have some more information for those game 2s ready to go. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head on over to FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets, baby. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
All right, as we do today's Locked On Nets episode, taking a look at some of these players on the board. On Friday, we're a little bit in between here for Fan Take Friday, because we said there's another player we want to talk about that might be like that perfect mold of Brooklyn Net. There's also a conversation about where the Brooklyn Nets are as far as 4 picks here. So I'm caught in between. So give us your feedback here. Get over on YouTube. Should we go and dive in not only another player, and maybe 2 more players, because we'll end up covering all 30 first-round prospects, maybe even 35 of them. Or do we give you here's our 4 picks. Did we build a good team when you talk about 8, 19, 26, and 27? But Clifford, the big red dog, but also an NBA prospect coming out here. And he's a player who, depending on where you go, you can find him a little bit higher on boards, even into the 20s, something in that 20 to 25 kind of range. I find him interesting mostly because it begs the question about age when we think about players, specifically for the Brooklyn Nets, but even at an NBA level. What do you like about his game? I do have a question I want to pose if the Nets are trying to maximize value when it comes to picks like these.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to resist the urge to talk about the age thing first because it's probably very top of mind. But what you're getting with Nique Clifford is you're getting a guy in the NBA come and score right now. Like he would come into the NBA on the Nets. He would be able to put a double-digit scoring as a first-year player, as a rookie, almost no doubt. 50% from the field, 38% from 3, could create his own shot. Got to have like a nice little step back game in his action. I mean, again, against like lesser defenders, but was willing to do that. Like the volume was there for him at CSU. It looks like totally there athletically. The body is already filled out, which is part of the age thing. Like, we've talked about this with other prospects in the past, but like when you watch his tape, you are not trying to wonder about like what's going to happen for him at the NBA level. Right. So I think like, you can't even do it without getting around the age thing, but like just from what you're getting, I think you're getting a really, really well-rounded player who, again, could step on an NBA court, I think, tomorrow and like not be a star or anything right away, but be totally fine. And just between like nose for the ball, could rebound the position really well for his size, wants to get his own shot, can shoot from 3 at volume, looks good, releases good. Like it's kind of all there. The numbers weren't eye-popping in college, which was the only reason you pump your brakes, and it's just not all the way into the top 10 on him. But it did kind of all come together here in the senior year where he was like playing a ton of minutes, getting a ton of shots, being efficient enough with it, and it just looks all the part on tape. So I try to get around this as much without getting into the age part because it factors in. But when you watch him play, as opposed to a lot of these other guys where you're like trying to figure out what it's going to look like at the NBA level, I did not have that feeling at all with him. I was like, oh, I know it's going to look like. It's going to look like this. Like it's going to look like the things that he's doing here, and I don't need to try to squint and see it. So I have another thought on this, but go ahead. Like or if you want to tee it up, you can. But there is like there's a yes, but to the rest of this like sort of missive. Oh, you're muted. Oh, buddy, we're trying to listen to you. We hear you, but you're just muted there, pal. There we go. Let's unmute yourself.
My big thing is, and I always say, bake the idea twice, because the second time is even more nice. So what I'm thinking is, as I'm
if you think we're going back and if you think we're going back and editing that out,
God.
Think again, my
God. If you think we're gonna take it out, you haven't been following the podcast for 6+ years.
Nice try, idiots.
Night, Susie. So let me get this thing back on track here. As I was going to say, plays 3 years at Colorado before he goes to Colorado State. And you mentioned there on volume, he had 175 3-point attempts in that second senior season. So he knocked down almost 38%. He was over 37% the year prior too. And it's a big uptick, right? That third year at Colorado in the Pac-12, he's only knocking down 29%. And then he takes the big bump up. Everything you mentioned about his game and translating to pros and being a walk in the door, have a role, be able to contribute is great. The problem from a Brooklyn Nets perspective is the age. Yeah. Because even if you think he's coming in the door and he's going to be able to contribute immediately, and we should kind of put this all in context, he will be okay. So 2 years from now, when you think maybe you've added a couple more pieces and you're ready to really compete, he'll be 25, going to be 26 years old. That's not the end of the world. You are talking about a guy that's going to be entering his prime and going to be hitting his stride. But my real question about this when it comes to the Brooklyn Nets is, if you're talking about a player in the draft that has all these measurables that can be a day one contributor, is there a value in Brooklyn drafting him because there's minutes for a player like that? And maybe you end up over the life of his rookie contract saying, we actually can showcase this kid as early as possible, maybe make him as valuable as possible. And even if he's not a part of our long-term future, we may be able to turn him into something more for ourselves. We may be able to leverage him when we talk about deadline trades, moving pieces, and getting more draft capital down the line. That's actually as much a part of the conversation from a Brooklyn standpoint as it is about the talent of this particular player when we're talking about picking somewhere in the back end of that first round.
Yeah, it's just, this is so tough because like he's the same age as Cam Thomas, right? Like he's the same age as Day'Ron Sharpe. Like he's old. He's 3 years older than Noah Clowney.
And 1 season from now, we'll have a more definitive opinion about him than we do on Cam Thomas as far as the Brooklyn Nets are concerned.
It's just like crazy. It's actually a testament to how good he was that he's even in this conversation, like at this, because most teams are going to look all the way past this age. Like the fact that he's even in this here at this age is like, you know, look about Jalen Wilson was like, whatever, the player of the year, a Big 12 player of the year or whatever. And he was like last pick in the draft or whatever. Now he's like, wasn't as good as Nique Clifford, but like he got bumped down all the way on age. Like Desmond Bane, the year the Grizzlies took him, I remember, I always go back to this because we said at the time, I was like, man, this guy, you could just see how it's going to happen. Like, it's like, you could see he's going to be the NBA. He slipped because he was old. Like, it was just like, well, he's already filled out. You already know what he's going to be. This is exactly what like, there's nowhere else to go. Once you're 23, there's like really nowhere else to go at that point. Like,
and there's nothing sexy about that from a draft perspective. Like, you're not dreaming on something. You're like, here he is. And that can still be valuable. It can still have value, but you can't
totally think about frankly, what happens a lot of times, these guys come in and they can play because of this. Like they can't, they're older and they're much more mature. Their body's filled out. They're stronger. They're smarter. They've gotten more court. They've just got played basketball for 3 more years than the other guys just because they're older. like the math just works in their favor, just having played more. So it does usually work out for a lot of these guys, but then it kind of top out at a certain thing because there was nowhere like to dream on. This one is close. Again, as a testament to how good he looked on tape and how good he was, that these guys usually at 23, you're not even usually considered in here. Like, because you're just too old. The team's like, well, you're going to be 26 by the time you need to make a decision on your contract. That's like getting toward ancient in NBA terms. I mean, not really, but you know what I mean? And so I don't think Sean Marks is going to do it, but if he did, it would kind of make sense to me in a like stability. Let's get some like real basketball players on the court here. I don't know. It's like so close. If he was 21, he might be like top 12 or something. Like, I think that's probably how good he is. It's just like, you can hear me stumbling because the age just throws you so far off. Real quick, last thing on this about the age, just as a comparison, I just told you how like old he was compared to the Nets. Like basically nobody else, I'm just looking real fast here. Nobody else in the top, projecting in the top 22-ish is like older than 20 years old, except for him. Everyone's 19, everyone's 20 or young, 20, flat 20 or younger.
Derek Queen's the only guy who's over 20 at the draft. Yeah.
Oh, did I just skip him? Did I skip Queen? Oh, he's a 20. Yeah,
He's
okay.
20
So
and a
yeah,
half,
everyone's basically 20. So he's like 3 years minimum, 3 years older than everybody else among his peers here. That's crazy, crazy. Anyway, we're going crazy on the age, but it is instructive because it's why he's not much higher on the boards, frankly.
And there's that conversation that we'll get into here with Thomas Sorber to close things out. When you look inside some of these draft boards and you think about a guy like Cam Jones out of Marquette, who's also over 23 years old, got a pretty good skill set, but you start talking about, yes, where is it? How much more can it grow at the NBA level? So as you say, good for Clifford that has at least pressed himself in that conversation. Remember, in a deep draft class, where might you still be talking about him otherwise? Because it's actually a strong case for a player that should have come out a year earlier. Like, however raw it may have looked after just 1 year at a new school, probably would have been a better spot in last year's draft class, a year younger than coming out now. Coming up here second, though, Thomas Sorber. Ooh, kind of sounds like sorbet. And I want 2 scoops of that for the Brooklyn Nets. We'll check it out here in just one moment. All right. As we tie a pretty bow on today's Locked On Nets episode, I got to tell you, I'm feeling loose as a goose, brother. You hear some of the words I'm doing here. The wordplay is great. The microphone's been all over the place. I've been muted. I've been up. I've been down. At the end of the day, we close it out talking about Thomas Sorber, another player who he actually, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm pretty sure that he's kind of lived in that 19, 20, like right around that range for most of the draft and combine as far as where he's been projected. 6'10", 263. Big body kind of player. Certainly a guy, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, when we talk about needing to get players at those front court positions that can offer something, and I do mean this, offer something that you can actually rely on consistently because they haven't had it. Nick Claxton, never had it with Dameron Sharp. Guys coming and going. They need to find an answer at the 5. Maybe Thomas Sorber is that guy.
He's massive. I'll give him that. Like, he's 6'10". He's a 7'6".
You're not going to dispute his size.
7'6" wingspan. I think they measured at 7'6". 7. I mean, yeah, right. Yeah, 7'6" wingspan. These are. I'm gonna get into him for a second. These are always the funniest conversations to have with people who don't follow basketball, because like I remember one time I was with a bunch of like different families and stuff, and we were talking. They were doing the old like, oh, your wingspan is the same as your height, right, for everybody, because that's like generally a universal thing. It's like, it's like you teach kids that. It's like, yeah, it's pretty much. And I was like, yeah, except like these NBA players. And I was going through some of their wingspans, and like people's like heads popped off because they just like never. I was like, it's not a universal constant. Like, actually, the best players sometimes are the guys who are like 6'5", but they have a wingspan of 7 feet. And people, like, if you don't follow basketball, you would just never believe that kind of thing can happen.
Yeah.
So
it's
like
why you account for like smaller players when they have a good wingspan, like backcourt guys go, hey, that's why they can hold up defensively, because they have this reach, because they are anatomically a bit of an outlier in the genetic pool.
Because I hate to break it to you, we're going to call it my server. It's not where your head stops that makes you a good basketball. It's where your hands stop. Like, it's like your hand, like, it doesn't matter where, it actually kind of doesn't even matter where your head is. It does to some degree, like, but at the end, it's actually only has
it should be on top of your neck for sure. But other than that,
because if you were 5'0", if you're 5 foot flat with a 7, so it would be weird, but like you would
first of all, be weird.
Still where your arms landed up. It's still where your arms will land up. So anyway, okay, we're all way off course here. So he's huge.
Imagine seeing a guy who was 5 foot tall with a 7 foot wingspan dunking a basketball. It'd be insane. On the highlight reels, you wouldn't even see his head. It would just be arms. Sorry, go on.
Well, it is funny when you think about it. It's like, yeah, it's not where your head stops. Like, nobody cares. It's like, it's where your arms stop, because that's the thing that holds the basketball, or blocks the basketball from someone else. Okay, so Sorber is like more of like a prototypical 5. Like, he's just your old school ground and pound kind of like get in the paint, use his body, kind of body other people, block guys that are smaller than him because he can kind of sit around the basket. Like, he's here because he's massive. The body's like filled out and like not like super athletic, but kind of good enough. And from like a basketball standpoint, he's just okay, I would say. He's not, I don't think he like jumps off the page by any means, but in the old, they just don't make guys with 7'6" wingspans like in Costco for you to go pick up and put on your team. Like, you just like want to, like, it helps to have guys like this around. So I don't think there's anything particularly remarkable at his game. I think he would come in and hold his own defensively to start, at least, like, not probably on switches or anything like that, but in terms of just getting in the paint and be able to just body other players. You could probably give him the ball in the post a little bit I mean, no one ever puts the ball in the post, but like, I think he could probably rim run just enough. He could set picks and get into a pick and roll game. He's not going to be a pick and pop kind of guy though, but he's here because he's big, and you just can't recreate this kind of bigness up and down the draft. Now I will say we've done a lot of guys like this. There are a lot of big players in this draft too. So I don't think this draft is like short on big body centers. And so I think that probably like hurts him a little bit. He's for sure a guy that some teams are going to like because they're going to go for the measurables and see if they can take everything else and make it into something. And then some teams are just going to wipe it away because they didn't see enough on tape to like convince them basketball wise. I think that's like my high level look at him.
And from a Brooklyn Nets standpoint, like we talked about Derek Queen, in this offseason, and I know the difference between where you'd be picking, Queen versus where you pick a guy like Sorber. But at that point, if you're talking about a model player and a big body, well, just give me the guy that's more athletic and give me the guy that also has court vision. Like Sorber, you mentioned it there. Hey, listen, you want to put him down the low block and he has a good sense of where players are going to be on the court and can do some things. The turnover to assist ratio is basically nil, slight positive. But okay, like maybe. But then at that point, if I'm the Brooklyn Nets and I have 8, 19, 26, and 27, I'll start to think about my other players that I can go there, and I'll just go with Derek Queen because the guy has the athleticism and he can get out and move and he has the court vision and all these things. And I'll take the upside of a player like that versus like whoever you take at 8, you end up at 19. I'd hate to feel like, we want to get a big body out of this draft. So let's go ahead with Sorber, who kind of lacks in some of these more defined areas. And you talk about the shooting, which obviously doesn't exist for him. Nothing from beyond the arc. What is it? Free throw over 70%. So I mean, that's at least respectable for a big. But without a sample,
he's never shooting threes
to suggest that. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what you know what I mean. Like this has like I'm not gonna say Day'Ron Sharp written all over him because not the same type of player. But it's that idea of like, a guy was like, and then if this thing, and this is to a far less degree in Sorber, but like, so you can't bank on that. So unless you're going to be an inside out kind of basketball team kicking it old school, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to look at this player and think like you're getting the requisite value on him. I'd like it better if you were talking about, here's a guy that's like fringe coming into the first round, back end. Is someone going to look at him, try to develop him because he is still young? That feels more like a place for him in a deep draft class. Again, deep draft class like this, that is all relative. For a player like Sorber, I like him more towards the back end and thinking about what he could be, as opposed to at 19, trying to convince yourself that this guy's going to come in the door and develop into something over the first couple of years.
I think he'd like hold his own. Like he does have pretty good court vision. He could probably get into the short roll and be okay. Yeah. Like I think that like he'll just get out there and just be high IQ enough to, because whenever you see like if you see like almost 7 footers averaging like 2.5 assists a game, like that's pretty good, and even at the college level, like that's a willingness to kind of get the ball and kind of figure out what's happening around you. And now, you look at 2.4 assists and it doesn't really jump off the page at you, but that's just a guy who it's kind of like winning basketball-ish kind of stuff.
Stealing a half per game as well. Like a couple of blocks, stealing a half per game. So like there's some little things happening here. And you mentioned it there. I think high IQ. I think he's doing a lot of it with IQ, over even, athleticism or where he is physically, from that standpoint on both ends of the floor.
Yeah. So I'm like looking at a team like where he would fit. So I'm like, let me just see if I can figure this out real fast. So now the Magic have a couple big bodies here. The Hawks, maybe. Yeah, the Hawks are interesting. Like with Trey, like setting screens for Trey. I could see that happening. I mean, maybe even like the Celtics, if they end up trading Staps and like they're just, Horford retires, like, and they just need somebody out there to kind of like grind out minutes and know that it can kind of be okay. Bad. Like I could see other teams that like, I mean, the Lakers would have been able to make a case for him if they had a pick in this draft, like just get another, like a big body center like that could play. I think that would have, they just don't have a pick here, but like, that's a guy that probably would have made sense. So there's like teams I could definitely tell a story. I just like, don't see the Nets as doing it. But Marks has taken Marks hasn't picked that many times and he's taken 2 centers. So like, I don't really, who knows what's and he might take another one at 8. So like, who knows what's like going through their head when it comes to the big centers, but yeah, not like a super exciting guy for me. But if I was like, again, if I was doing Locked On Lakers and they had a pick in the 20s for some reason because they still had their pick, I for sure would be talking about him because I'd be like, okay, they need a center, they need a guy who has high IQ, they need a guy that like he could fill in a lot of stuff for them.
And again, by the way, like you mentioned, a team like the Lakers, why? Because where are they? What are they trying to accomplish? They already have LeBron. They already have Luka, right? So like when you check some of the highest possible level of boxes, then you start thinking about guys, can they serve a fit and function for us? Fantastic. As opposed to the Brooklyn Nets, we're talking about upside and developing players and where will they fit? Where will they be another season or two from now? Tomorrow, before we get out of here. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about, there's another, I'm going to mention the name here as the tease because Doug brought him up to me off podcast. I was like, yep, I had him on the board there. And by the way, by Ringer standards, they have Cedric Howard out of Washington State 16th on their big board right now. So we'll have a conversation about him. And I think
I might go higher.
Tune in. You never know which way. I'm going to go higher. I'm going to go 8. I'm going 8. But where will we land? I think tomorrow we'll also end up doing something along the lines of 4 picks. Let's just go ahead. Let's go ahead and call 4 shots out here. Brooklyn Nets draft all 4, 8, 19, 26, and 27. See if Doug and I can build an interesting, exciting, fun to watch upside roster for the Brooklyn Nets coming out of the first round.
By the way, everyone do this. If you're listening to the end of the episode, throw in your 4 picks. I'll aggregate everyone's together. We'll go over on Twitter. I'll see if I can get everyone's top 4. Who does everyone want? We'll see if we can put it together, and I'll see maybe get something up here to just like shout out to like if there's any sort of consensus building around what's going to happen. So you got to try to get all 4. Try to go all 4 picks. Just 4 guys. Doesn't need to line up or anything. But I just want to see what people say. We'll call out some of these on the show or pick some of our favorite ones too. Maybe I'll just use one of yours like it was my idea too. Then I don't need to think about it. So actually, even better.
God, I can't believe this guy nailed it. Yeah.
Oh, great. Well, it's like what I did to Adam. I was like, "Who are you? Who did you want to talk about first?" And he's like, "I'll do this guy." And I'm like, "That's the guy I was going to say." So we'll do this. I'll pick the best one. I'll then pretend like it was mine. But then what I'll also do is I'll make you feel very smart and say that you'll be like, wow, you had the same one as Doug. So it's like, it's going to be one of those things where everyone wins. I don't have to do that much research.
That's what everybody wins.
And we feel like there's some kind of like, thing mind meld going between us as basketball fans. With that in mind, also the other way to help is you leave your top 4, then you go hit subscribe wherever you listen, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, number 1 way to help the show. Free for you. Go hit subscribe wherever you listen.
I go through periods, usually when I'm editing and shooting, of seeing only old films. Maybe old films is the way to go for the Brooklyn Nets with some of these bodies out there. And that, the first part at least, was one Martin Scorsese.
One of the all-time great poets.
He's not dead, Doug. Don't kill him off.
You know what? I knew he wasn't. I know we flubbed the who's been dead on the podcast before, but I knew that Scorsese was not dead. That would be a real loss. Okay.
You know what he has been on? Oh my God. Sorry. I can tell you tomorrow. Great HBO show with Seth Rogen. Oh, The Studio. Lovely. Martin Scorsese makes an appearance.
One of the all-time great poets. We're back in tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. A little off the rails. Basketball. Yeah.